Did you know that 90% of business owners do not have a written marketing plan? As women of faith in business, scripture instructs us to write the vision and make it plain. So I'm giving you an invitation to write your marketing plan and make it plain by discovering two powerful ways to successfully plan your marketing so you can attract your ideal clients and prosper in your God-given purpose. Go to nadinemullings.com/power. That's nadinemullings.com/power to get started on your marketing plan so you can start attracting your ideal clients in the marketplace. Welcome to the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Mullings. I'm an author, speaker, and podcast host, and I believe in the importance of women of faith stepping up, shining in their lane, and sharing their God-given message so they can have the impact, income, and influence they were born to make. Join me this season to discover how women of faith in business are using podcasts as their platform to share their mission-driven message. And be sure to join the Women Faith Plus Business community by going to nadinemullings.com/community. That's nadinemullings.com/community. See you in the powerful community of women of faith in business, and enjoy this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. I have an amazing guest with me next. Kris is someone that I've known for a while now. It's been a couple years, and it's always interesting when you meet people online and through different networking groups. We met through a group called Pinnacle Forum. We were talking about it a little briefly before we hit record, but it's a Christian-based, how would you describe it? It's a Christian, I don't want to say networking. Well, how would you describe it, Kris?
A national leadership organization they have forums which are gender specific, so you can kind of do life together, both personally and professionally, as you impact culture for Jesus' glory.
Exactly. So a leadership forum, that was the word I couldn't remember. So it's definitely an opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals, all people of faith, all Christians, wanting to just grow as leaders professionally and personally. So I was a part of Pinnacle Forum for a while and had the pleasure of meeting Kris. So I'm excited for us to have a conversation today. Kris Castro is also the host of Lead Upside Down podcast. So as you know, this season we're focusing on women of faith and business who are using their God-given voice in the form of a podcast. So we're going to hear all about Kris's journey and Kris's story with the Lead Upside Down podcast. In case you don't know much about her, I also want to share her background. With over 30 years of biblical leadership experience as an ICF certified coach, trainer, facilitator, and inspirational speaker, Kris Castro shepherds marketplace and ministry leaders into the fullness that Jesus wants for them, according to John 10:10, and inspire and encourage them to courageously launch into their next level. We're all at a certain level, so getting to that next level of faith and growth with Jesus by developing an adventure mindset. Love that. Adventure is one of my core values. So developing an adventure mindset, they can lead from an upside down perspective, as Jesus did, stepping into the unknown and boldly fighting the good fight to finish the race. 2 Timothy 4, verse 7-8. He has divinely and uniquely selected for them to significantly impact their sphere of influence for his glory. Kris is also adept to active listening to guide individuals into safe, sacred, conversational spaces to explore new options, make decisions, and create impactful plans that move them into their new seasons of life. I love it, Kris. So many things in your bio I can relate to. New seasons, listening, that active listening and being really skilled at that. I love that that is all a part of who you are and also a part of the work that you do in the world. So, as I mentioned, this season, actually, this is the second season, we're focusing on women of faith and business who are using their voice. They're actually using their voice on podcasts, YouTube channels, Facebook Lives, but they're using it in a way to make an impact for the kingdom and specifically on shows and podcasts. So, you have a podcast, Lead Upside Down, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the inspiration behind Lead Upside Down.
Sure. Thank you so very much for having me on the podcast. I'm excited. So I think the podcast was more of an opportunity for me to continue to share about the difference between leadership and biblical leadership. And it's one of those things where I've done a lot of growing in my life. And spiritually, I've learned a whole lot. I went through seminary, and of course, I grew a lot in seminary. I got my master's in pastoral ministry, graduated in 24. And in the process of all of that, I kept seeing over and over the differences between just being a leader and being a biblical leader, and being a Christian in name, but not in action. And so the verse that kind of stuck out was the one that's on the square behind me, for those of you that are viewing the YouTube video. It's Acts 17:6, and in the King James New Translation, I think it's that one, it actually says that the troublemakers at the time were turning the world upside down. And the reason they were turning the world upside down is because they were doing things in a way that was biblical, which was completely different than culture was doing it. And it was messing with a lot of power structures. And it was messing with a lot of just traditional ways of doing things. And I really thought that's a great way to live, in terms of, if you're going to be Jesus, because Jesus turned the world upside down, if you're going to be like Jesus and say that you're a Christian, you really need to be acting in a way that reflects him. And so leading upside down became a theme for me. And I started interviewing people about how they were leading upside down, because I do know a lot of leaders who are leading upside down in a biblical way. And it was wonderful to hear their stories.
Yeah, I think that is so awesome. I just love everything about that. First of all, biblical leadership. Like, we hear a lot about leadership in general in the marketplace and being a good leader, leading with your heart, heart-centered leaders, all this stuff. But biblical leadership is so much different than just leadership in general. And to be honest, I don't really see a lot of people talking about it. So I love that you took the initiative of, okay, what does biblical leadership mean? And what does leading upside down mean? Because that's exactly what Jesus did. And as followers of Christ, Christians, our goal is to follow Jesus' example in the way that he lived in the world. And he offended a lot of people, including other people of the faith, I should say, right? Because he wasn't traditional, and he was doing things so differently. So I love that you were able to lead that conversation and had that inspiration to start the podcast. So what would you say from all those conversations have been, or maybe one story or a couple stories from the podcast that really stood out as true examples of leading upside down and doing things countercultural as a leader? Can you think of any examples of that really stood out for you as you interviewed people, or in your life, however you feel led to share?
Sure. There was a lot of themes, whereas biblical leaders in their relationships, whether they're personal or professional, they live with a higher standard aligned with biblical treatment. Regardless of how people are treating them, they would do their best, not perfectly, but they would do their best to be loving and gracious. And so there were a lot of stories around that where people were being treated really badly, and they had to choose to walk through that situation with love and grace. They didn't, they weren't doormats. That's not what people often think, that when you say love and grace, you're being a doormat. You are not. I have been through situations where I've had to walk through some really difficult relationship situations, and I was not a doormat, but I did have to learn to ignore certain things as I could. I had to fight battles where I needed to fight them, but I also had to offer love and grace when there was evidence that nothing's going to change, and why am I making my life miserable because I'm trying to change it. So there were themes like that. There were also themes about how people handled uncertainty. A lot of times when people are uncertain, they start grabbing for control. They start grabbing for whatever certainty they can get, especially in the area of finances. I mean, in my own life, my finances have been like a roller coaster, which is pretty much the entrepreneurial journey. But the Lord really taught me how to live one day at a time. And I had to be okay with $5 in my checkbook. I had to be okay with this bill didn't get paid when it was supposed to. And the non-Christians out there, or the nominal Christians out there, they might say, well, what did you do? Why aren't you in alignment with God's will? Like all of that stuff. And yes, that could be possible, but it could also be possible that I am in alignment and that Jesus is just teaching me how to be faithful, which was my case. I really was in alignment in all the ways I was supposed to be. And Jesus was just teaching me to be faithful in a deeper way, which then became the launching pad for other situations for me to have peace in where normally people wouldn't. And so those were the themes, and theme after theme after theme of really walking through different kinds of situations aligned with faith, trust, hope, and tenacity in believing what Jesus said to that person about that situation.
Yeah, I love that. So good, so good. And that's what I love about podcasts, especially when you have a specific topic, usually whatever the name of your podcast is or whatever the title of your podcast is, that's your topic. So when you have that topic and you start interviewing people, you do recognize a pattern. You do recognize a theme, and you see, so this is what most people are experiencing, or this is the key thing that people are feeling in this area, or this is the key issue, and this is how people overcome. So I love that you were able to see those themes when it comes to really leading upside down and being different than the rest of the culture, in the ways that you lead or even run your life or run your business. And I agree with you, because as you were sharing the story about, having $5 in our account, first of all, what entrepreneurship hasn't had a zero or negative balance in their account? I think it's a rite of passage, right? You have to go through those hard times in order to really be an entrepreneur. Otherwise, I feel like then either you were spoon-fed your business and you weren't really, I don't want to say scrappy, but you weren't really the type of entrepreneur that really goes through the natural ups and downs of entrepreneurship and having negative balances and zero balances. But I love when you shared that story, because it reminded me of in the Bible where the disciples were questioning Jesus about why someone was sick or lame or whatever the ailment was that they had. And he was like, they asked, was it a sin? Was it their parents? Was it their family or whatever? And Jesus said, no, it was none of that. It was actually so people can see the result of the work that I do with this particular person, like how I healed them. So that negative aspect was for that person to actually be a living testament of God's grace, God's mercy, God's healing power. So I love when you explained your story, because it felt to me like, okay, she is actually a testimonial of what God can do when you have zero in your account or $5 in your account. It's not a matter of you've done anything wrong and you're not in alignment. It's actually just working on your story. It's working on your testimony. It's working on showing God's grace in your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is something to be said, though, about blockages. So I would always say, if you're experiencing continually obstacles,
Yeah.
start by looking at all the things that could be blocking you, like unforgiveness, like resentment and bitterness, all the things that the Bible talks about that are blockages. And if you're good, and if you ask Jesus, can you bring to mind anything that I'm not aware of, because we're not always aware of everything, and there's a sense of peace, then just trust that you're in the situation to grow in some way. It's not a punishment. You're there to grow.
Yeah. And growth is not easy. Growth can be hard, and growth can be messy. And growth can be uncomfortable. So we experience all of those things as entrepreneurs. So I'd love for you to share if you had a specific vision, like when you decided, okay, I really have this on my heart to start the conversation and initiate the conversation about biblical leadership and leading upside down. Did you have a vision of what you wanted the podcast to do, or what was your vision for the podcast at the time when you decided to launch it?
No, I didn't have a vision. I've launched a bunch of different things for bunches of different reasons, and it's more so, this is on my heart, let's just do it and see what happens. And so I did. And there have been months where I didn't do a podcast. Just right now, I've been on a break because life has happened and I've been dealing with a bunch of things. So I haven't put out a podcast in a little while, but I intend on picking it back up again. I'm launching the Greater Atlanta Christian Chamber Coalition with another local friend. And she and I are moving forward with that. And I'm going to use the podcast as an opportunity to showcase the membership once we start launching and getting members. So that's going to be pretty regularly done once all of this gets situated.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true that we have seasons, right? That's something that I've been hearing a lot from other people this season, that sometimes you can pause or stop your podcast for other things that you have going on. Someone else said they're launching a book, you're launching, an organization in your area. So I love the fact that with podcasting, you can always pick it back up. Right? You can put it down for a season, but you have a vision. You do have a vision to continue it once you launch, the chamber. So you can always pick your podcast up. So even if someone's watching or listening and they're like, man, I started a podcast, but I only had 3 episodes and I haven't done it in a year, you can still pick it up. If you feel led, if you feel in your heart that message is still important, you can always pick it up a year later, 2 years later, whatever. When it's your season to pick it up again. So I love that. So what do you want listeners to take away from the episodes that you have recorded and that are out there? What would you say would be one key word, one key phrase, or one key mindset shift or thought that you would want people to take away from the podcast? So if they listen to just one episode, or if they binge watched or binge listened to the entire podcast, what would you want? What would be your hope? What would be your desire for that person to take away from the podcast?
If somebody wanted to binge listen or binge watch, you could do it on Spotify or YouTube. I would love that. Just Google Lead Upside Down Kris Castro and you would find it. But I think really the running theme through all the episodes is surrender. It's really just trusting Jesus to that deep degree, regardless of the situation. That letting go, like sometimes you have to lay down your own rights, which is so hard. Sometimes you have to be okay with the consequences of somebody else's actions because it's so hard. And it's just that daily one day at a time. For me, it's that daily one day at a time thinking, why am I worrying about tomorrow? It hasn't arrived yet. Why am I stressing about X, Y, and Z? It hasn't happened yet. If it's like in 30 seconds something's going to happen, just trusting that Jesus is with you, and if it gets royally messed up, you'll get through it. And there'll be a brighter future at some point.
Exactly.
This is a good God, regardless of whether or not we feel like it in the moment.
Yeah, so true. No matter what the circumstances, the situation, it's so important to surrender. Surrender it to God and trust, right? So you're not just surrendering and then worrying behind the scenes and like, oh my gosh, it's going to work out, is it not? But we're going to surrender and trust. And that is the key takeaway when you listen to the Lead Upside Down podcast. So I'd love, since that's the key takeaway from the Lead Upside Down podcast, I'd love for you to share maybe a personal story if you feel comfortable, or a recent story or a story in your past where you've totally had to surrender because of a certain circumstance that you were in. Again, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, because of a certain situation, circumstance that you were in, and you really learned that what I need to do at this moment is totally surrender and trust God. Can you share a story or a time specifically for you that you've had to do that?
Sure. There's a bigger story behind what I'm about to tell you, but the bigger story started in 2017. The story I'm going to tell you starts in 2018. So after a really dark, difficult crisis of faith year in 2017 that I was going through, in 2018, the Lord asked me to pack up everything that I owned and go, but he wouldn't tell me where. And I was like, that makes no sense, Lord. Like, go where? And he wouldn't tell me. He just said, pack up and go. And a lot of things happened beforehand, which helped me understand that he was really saying, I want you to get rid of your lease, put all your stuff in storage, and get in your car, and you're just going to be with me. And you're just going to be in the car, and you're just going to go places. And I struggled with that because it was crazy. And I ended up, through a bunch of confirmations, realizing that that's really what he meant. This is not for everybody who's listening, by the way. This was an individual assignment for me, for my growth, okay? You do not have to follow this pattern unless Jesus says. But so I got in the car and I was like, all right, where am I going? And I literally spent 3 months and 14,000 miles traveling the country, not knowing, for the most part, really not knowing where I was going, where I was going to eat, where I was going to sleep. I stopped at a lot of friends and family along the way, but I also stopped at places that Jesus just led me to. Part of that was popping in the Celebrate Recovery groups to speak because they needed a speaker. But the entire trip was a complete surrender because I never knew where my provision was coming from. And miraculous things happened along the way. And I ended up writing a book about it called Crazy Might Be a Blessing in Disguise. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I'm so glad I said yes. And I came back a really different woman, because you can't go through that 3-month lifestyle and not come back knowing Jesus really is the provider.
Yeah, so good. And such a great example of surrender and trust, right? When you shared that, I thought about Abraham immediately because God was like, leave your family, leave everyone behind and go to a place that I'm not going to tell you yet. That seemed like the same instruction that you got, but to hear it, sometimes you hear stories in Bible days and think, oh, back then, right?
Oh
But when you
no.
hear, yeah, it's happening all the time, every day. And as we record 2025, somebody could be getting that instruction again. As Kris said, it's not for everyone. So we're not telling anyone to pack up and put their stuff in the car and travel for 3 months. But it is a specific instruction that can help you grow if you've been confirmed to do something like that and change you as a person. But it requires surrender and trust. If you don't surrender and you don't trust, then you're not going to have the ability or be willing to do that, right? So that's why surrender and trust is so key to that particular story, and also that particular instruction. So I love it. I love it. I love it. So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do in the world, how you help people, and how people can connect with you if they not only want to listen to your amazing podcast about leading upside down and biblical leadership, but they want to get a little bit deeper into the work that you do in the world. Tell us a little bit more about that work, and then how people can actually connect to you.
Sure. I love public speaking because I'm a big believer that stories of inspiration really help people take the next level of faith. So I've, spoken publicly at different places, whether it be conferences or women's groups or virtual groups, in-person groups, whatever. So if anybody needs a women's speaker or a speaker of kind of a faith journey to inspire their people to take the next level of faith, I would love to do that. I am a certified ICF coach, leadership coach, life coach, whatever you want to do. But I'm really excited about focusing the coaching environment to help people grow with Jesus and to develop personal adventures with Jesus. And all that means is you are feeling like you are being asked to grow in a certain way and you don't know how to get there. And so a coach would come alongside you and help you. And so that would be something that I could do. As well as the Christian, the Greater Atlanta Christian Chamber of Commerce, the launch of that. For anybody that's listening that's in the Atlanta area, you could go to the website, which I don't think I gave it to you. I'll have to shoot you the website for the chamber so that you can add that to the bio. But we have an interest form on there, which is just getting on the newsletter list, and that way you can keep abreast of what we're doing for launch activities.
Awesome. I love it. So if you're looking for a speaker, think of Kris. If you're in need of a coach, think of Kris. And if you're in the area and you want a community and a chamber, definitely check out the links that we'll have in the show notes for that. So thank you so much, Kris, for being on the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. Did you know that 90% of business owners do not have a written marketing plan? As women of faith in business, scripture instructs us to write the vision and make it plain. So I'm giving you an invitation to write your marketing plan and make it plain by discovering 2 powerful ways to successfully plan your marketing so you can attract your ideal clients and prosper in your God-given purpose. Go to NadineMullings.com/power. That's NadineMullings.com/power to get started on your marketing plan so you can start attracting your ideal clients in the marketplace. Thank you for listening to the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. I hope this episode has been insightful and inspiring and has offered you an opportunity to take action to transform your life and your business. Wherever you are listening, be sure to rate and review the podcast and also subscribe to get the next episode right in your inbox by going to womenfaithandbusiness.com to join our email list.